Good morning. My talk today is a little bit different from what Tony was talking about, and I'm going to talk actually about international students, in particular what's been happening at the moment with them, in order to understand the context about the stresses and vulnerabilities that they're actually facing at the moment. And I'm going to talk about also their resilience and ways to move forward, especially in terms of messaging to international students when it comes to issues like gambling harm. I think one of the things that we need to understand at the moment is what students are going through, and this is not just international students, but this is really students in general, especially in higher education, post-secondary. There's a very strong feeling of vulnerability. We're talking about 19, 20-year-olds who have all of a sudden been asked to stay at home. And so even like colleagues of mine who are dealing with students in terms of staff student consultations are also feeling that brunt that students are taking out sometimes their difficulties on staff. And part of that is again you've got 19, 20-year-olds who need to express themselves, and being confined can be very claustrophobic. I interviewed a PhD student a couple of months ago, and she was talking about how her entire world is a bedroom. She works in her bedroom, she sleeps in her bedroom, she eats in the bedroom. She's got flatmates, but there's just this kind of issue of claustrophobia which she can't get over. There is frustration with many students at the moment, and again, not just international students, but undergraduates and postgraduates. They don't know what's going on. They're fearful about their futures. There was a study of over 1,000 PhD students or postgraduate students where the majority of them basically don't even see a future doing their studies. So you've got all these really issues and feelings that we've never dealt with before. I always explain to people that when we talk about international students, we actually don't have a historical template, because the last time we had a pandemic was 100 years ago, and at that time we didn't have many international students. So moving forward, trying to figure out what's going to happen next is actually really difficult. So we're dealing with the kind of situation which we don't know, and we don't know how to deal with it. And I think that's one of the hardest things for people like all of all of us who actually have to a passion as well as a vocation to help people. So these are sort of some of the things that students are also international students are in particular are going through. Now, for international students in particular, all these feelings are also intensified by cultural isolation, and lack of extended family close by. Well, even my PhD student, who is from a Southeast Asian country, is very, very worried about his family back home, because he doesn't know what's going to happen to them. He's worried about them getting COVID. He feels actually safer in Australia. So these issues of continually trying to figure out whether or not your family is safe. They're also worried about issues like taking leave of absence. So a lot of international students who are very unlike the domestic students is that because they're on a visa, so they can't take a leave of absence. They're worried about their visa issues. They're worried that they literally can't come back. And students are currently, interestingly enough, studying both either remotely in Australia or remotely back in their home countries. And one of the problems with studying in your home country, especially if you're a new student, is that you don't have friendship networks. So I've interviewed students where they're still back in their home countries. They want to come to Australia, but obviously they can't, and so they're feeling very, very left out. So you've got sort of like those kind of issues. Some of the other things that we've actually been seeing is, of course, heightened xenophobia. Now, one thing to bear in mind with a lot of international students is that they don't actually read or watch Australian news, believe it or not. They don't even watch SBS. So where they're getting their news from is from wherever social media platforms or social media apps that they subscribe to, and this can, you can't quite control the narrative sometimes. So I've seen sort of like even myself being quoted or my work being used on Chinese media social media platforms where apparently I was interviewed, but actually I wasn't. So you've got sort of like things like that sort of like happening. So it's a different sort of like world for them, and I think what sort of like quite a number of international students at the moment, especially those who are in private with private providers. So private providers are those who are for profit, and a lot of the times that they specifically market to international students. So this is not sort of like the state universities like RMIT or Melbourne Uni, but sometimes they can be shop fronts, in Swanston Street. So for many of them, what they really worry about is really security in terms of housing security, food security. I've seen photographs that people have taken of international students who are lining outside food banks. And the thing for international students is that they don't have access to JobKeeper, to job seeker. So there's a lot of financial insecurities. And so this is why sort of like if you go out for a walk, you see what looks like quite a few international students who are actually taking part in the gig economy, and that gig economy is also so precarious. So they'll be doing things like delivery driving, Uber Eats. So again, this added kind of like pressures for them where it's not just about study. I think one of the things about the stereotype of international students, and this is something that I've seen in a lot of forums, is that the criticism that they should not be working, that their only purpose is to come to Australia to study, and that's sort of like really not quite understanding their situation. So for many international students, they do work very hard in terms of that kind of gig economy in order to to pay the bills. So when COVID came and many of them lost their jobs, there was this fear about what's going to happen. What am I going to do? I can't go back home because borders are closed. So they have these sort of like added added pressures of the networks not being there, and the support not being there, whether it's emotional or financial, right? So you've got sort of like all these sort of like issues that they go through. But the thing about international students, which is never quite recognized, is that they also have a very strong sense of resilience, the ability to adapt. And one of the main things that we're seeing is that their adaptability is also due to the networks that they have. So social networks are really, really important. And this is why we always, especially at institutional level, we tell all students, you need to connect, right? New students, very difficult because they don't know anyone. But for students who are already here, who've been through the system, who have been here for at least of like a year, they actually build up very strong social networks, especially with other international students, and also sort of like those kind of cultural connections. So in terms of moving forward, one of the things I think that we need to think about is how to message to people, right? So I said earlier, right? International students don't watch SBS. So if you want to message to them, don't go through this kind of like established media. Go through those networks. Understand what are the things or what are the platforms that they use, and you message to there. One of the projects I did sort of like last year was a project called Contact Points, and what we were trying to do was to understand how international students understand basic messages. So by messages I mean sort of like call 000, right? Swim between the flags. So when we took these, what we did was we interviewed emergency services and health services, and we asked them, what's your blue sky? What do you want students to know? So they gave us this whole list, and So we took this list to international students. We kind of whittled it down to 20 key messages. And my colleague and myself who were previously international students thought we obviously knew better, right? Being international students, so we know the community. So we took these messages and we did all these focus groups, and we literally had to change every single message because students couldn't understand, even though we synthesized those messages and we thought that we knew how to message to them. So, this is sort of like the thing that the way that we need to message as well is we need to actually understand the context of international students. So one of the things that sort of like, I think when we talk about gambling harm is understanding how to message to students, and also understanding that, especially with the Northeast Asian students, they come from environments where when their parents come to visit, the first thing the parents want to do is to go to the casino. And so it's, if we try to tell them that, this is actually a very bad thing, this becomes very confusing to them. So it's about really understanding how we can actually message. And I think sort of like also researching about currently what is the situation for, not just international students, but maybe even just young people. What does working from home, what does staying at home mean? Because again, we've never had this kind of situation before, and so for even young people, whether or not they're international or not, or from CALD communities, how do they navigate that home space? And what do they basically do in that home space? And I think part of moving forward is actually understanding that. And I think sort of like one of the other things to actually bring up is that um, um, especially with international students, the ability to connect. And I think institutions in particular are doing a very, very good job in trying to, make sure that students connect to each other. But also for students, they're going through digital fatigue. I mean, all of us are, right? One of the reasons why I don't use slides also is I know that this is a time where it's a good time to make tea, coffee or tea, right? So, and same with students. And one of the things that we also find is that with many students, they're going through such digital fatigue right now that they're also missing really important emails because there's just so many things out there. So I think maybe it's sort of like to end of, one of the things that, to move forward is understanding how we can message, understanding the current situation that people are in, and then creating programs that meets those kind of needs. Because like I said earlier, we don't have a historical template, and this is really all about moving forward.
Fantastic.